What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be going over the Python virtual environment. So I'm going to show how to get that installed. I'm going to show what it is, and I'm going to show how to get it activated so that you can create your own Python virtual environment. So what is a Python virtual environment? It is a isolated space that has its version of a Python interpreter, libraries, and scripts. So this is perfect for, if you want to create your own space for a project or any other things that you're using Python. This keeps it separated from the global system. It creates its own isolated space. And a good example of why this is useful is when you have, different projects that you're building on your computer, and they all require different versions of dependencies because some projects or some dependencies interact with each other differently, and they may need certain versions, and other dependencies may need another version. So maybe you want to have your own isolated space that has the version of the dependency that you need, that's separate from the global system that you have. And also, if you want to only install that dependency within that space but not globally, virtual environments are perfect. And you can also share those dependencies with other people. We can freeze and we can list all the dependencies that we installed in that environment, and we can share with other people, whoever else is using or whoever else is building on that project. So it makes it very useful for everyone to have the same dependencies, same version of those dependencies as well. So if you can see on the screen, you're able to see the documentation for virtual env, or venv for short. It shows you that what you will need. So you will need to install pip. So it'll show you how to do that here. And if you want to see the version that you installed, you can do that as well using these two commands. But then the meaty stuff is actually installing virtual env. As you can see from the description here, virtual env is used to manage Python packages for different projects. So like I said, you can create isolated environments for each individual project that you have. So maybe you might need dependencies for one project and another dependency for another, but you want to keep them isolated towards that project specifically. This is perfect. So to get that installed, all you have to do is run this command. They have one for Unix and Mac OS, and they have one for Windows if you click on the tab. And I'm going to leave a link to this in the description. And once you have that installed, it is time to create the virtual env or the venv. And I'm going to show this in VS Code, but I just wanted to show like where you can get these commands and where you can read up more on it, and then also activating it as well and more. I would just advise reading all the way to the end, but really the most important stuff is creating the virtual environment and activating the virtual environment. So let's switch over to VS Code so we can actually see this in action. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so now for the fun stuff. I hope the view is big enough for you to see, but now it's time to actually create a virtual environment. So I'm first going to go over what we first saw, which is how to install the virtual environment. So it's going to be Python 3, and this is for Mac OS, but Python 3, and it doesn't have to be Python 3. It can be Python for you guys, depending on how you have it set up on your computer. I know some people use as aliases, so they probably went into their bash profile and set it up so that Python 3 is actually just using Python. But in this case, I'm just using Python 3. And then Python 3-m. This -m just lets Python know that we're about to put a module name that we want to retrieve. So in this case, the module is going to be pip, and then we're going to do a pip install. And then we're going to use --user. This --user just lets the computer know that we only want to install on this user's system, not globally, not for all the users on this device, just this user. And we want to install virtual env. Granted, I'm not going to do this command because I already did it, so it's not needed for me, but that's how you would do it on a Mac. Alright, so for the Windows users, what you would have to do, and this is not a Windows device, so I'm not going to run the command, but this is the command that you will run. You will do py-m pip install -user virtual env. Now it will be -m because we're getting this module name of pip. We're doing the pip install, and we're doing this pip install only. We're using --user to let the computer know that we're only installing for this user. We're not installing throughout all the users on the computer. Now, if you want to do it for all the users, then you'll remove this --user and just do pip install virtual env, and it will download virtual env globally. But in this case, I only want to install it for this user, so I'm going to put --user. So this is how you do it for Windows. I'm not going to run the command, but just to keep the Windows users involved. Alright, so now it is time to actually create the virtual environment. So what I am going to do is run this command really quick, Python 3. And like I said before, it doesn't have to be Python 3. It really depends on how you have Python set up on your device. So maybe you have Python 3 just set up as Python, but in my case I have Python 3 set up as Python 3. And then I'll do Python 3-m. We're going to get the module name of venv from virtual environment. So this is going to be used to actually create the virtual environment, and in this case I'm going to call it env. The name can be anything you want. It's just going to be isolated environment, so I'm just going to call it env. But you have to think about it. Maybe if you're going to have a .env, it might get a little bit confusing for you, so you can call it something else. You can do isolated env if you want. You can name whatever you want, but for me I'm going to call it env because I know I'm not going to have a .env. So let's create that, and now we should expect to see a folder that appears up here. So if we open this up, we will see a bin folder, an include folder, and a lib folder. These are pretty much all the tools that this environment is going to need to run anything Python related. So the the script, the interpreter, all of that. And if we open up the bin folder, which is going to be what we use soon to activate this virtual environment, because right now it's not activated. We just created a virtual environment, but we have to actually activate it. So if we actually install something right now, it'll still be installed globally. Once we activate the virtual environment, once we do any installations, it's going to go within this virtual environment. It's not going to go and install it globally. This bin folder includes a script used to activate the virtual environment. So let's do that really quick. Let's do a source, and this is for Mac. Let's do a source env, which in this case I'm just using the name that I use for the virtual environment. So if you use something else, this will be where you will place that name. Then do a /, then do a bin, because if you go into this env folder, like I said, this is why we use the name that we created the virtual environment as. Take the name of that, so you're going into this bin folder, create another / or put another /, and then put activate, because it is going to go into this activate and it's going to run this script. And then boom, we should see env, which is the name of our virtual environment, in parentheses, just to show that it is activated. Now we can actually confirm that we're using the env besides the parentheses env by doing a which python, and this will pretty much show the directory of where we're retrieving Python from, and in this case is grabbing the Python from the bin folder of this virtual environment that we created, so we can see that it's working. So now that we're in this isolated environment, let's do an install. Let's install the dependency that that we're gonna need. So let's do a pip3 install, and we're gonna use the dependency request. This is just used to make API calls or make requests to URLs. So we're gonna need that. So it is installed now, and if we do a pip show request, boom, we're able to see everything about this dependency. Python HTTP for humans. Now let's clear that up, and let's do a deactivate. So let's see if this environment actually is isolated from our global Python system. So to get out of this environment, we're just going to do deactivate, and you will see that this env is gone, so that means we're out of the environment. And now let's do a pip3 show, and then we're gonna do request again, request with S. Press enter. Boom. Packages not found. So we just saw that we installed a request and we were able to see it when the env was activated. But now that we're out of the environment and we're trying to see if we have a dependency, it's not there because it is not in the global instance of the Python that we have on our computer, but it's only inside of that env that we created. So let's go back. Let's do a source, and let's do an env, and let's do a bin. And if you always want to remember how, like, what this is, all you got to do is open up the folder, cenv, cbin, and then activate. And let's do that. And then if we do pip3 show request again, boom, you're able to see everything about this dependency again. But it's only when we're inside of this isolated environment that we have access to this. So if, say for instance, you have a project in the same directory, or honestly, I don't think you need to be in the same directory. As long as you have this activated, and you have a project running, it should work fine. But once you deactivate this environment and you're using the global dependencies, and if it's not there, then your project is not going to run properly. But when you're inside of this isolated environment, then it should work as expected. So that is the cool thing about virtual environments. We're able to set one up. We're able to see how to activate it, how to deactivate it, and there's a use case. If you want to install specific dependencies, but only want to do it for a specific project, then we can just create a virtual environment for that. And while we're still here, maybe, like I said before, maybe you want a specific version of a dependency, right? So let's do a pip3, and let's do an uninstall of request, because we're using a too up-to-date request version. Maybe we want an older version. So that is also possible. And let's see if we actually still have request in this environment. So boom, it's not there anymore. We uninstalled it. But now let's do a pip3 install, and let's do request, and let's make that equal to, so before the latest version was 2.28.1, but maybe we need a 2.27.1. Boom. All right, so now if we do a pip3 and then we do show, and let's clear this up, this is actually getting really ugly. So let's do a pip3 and then let's do show and then request. We see, boom, version 2.27.1, different from the 2.28.1 that we had before, when we just let Python install without giving a specific version. So say for instance we have a project that we want to use this version instead of the latest version, we can create an isolated environment that does that. Now let's deactivate this. Let's do a deactivate, and let's do a pip3 install request, and I'm just gonna install that globally. Boom. And then if we do it, clear this up, pip3 show request, you obviously see that the most up-to-date version that it will install is 2.28.1. Then we can do, we just activate it again. I'm gonna do this really quickly because we're pros at this now. We know what to do. And then we just activate it, and if we do, I'll clear this one more time, pip3 show request, boom, 2.27.1. So it's separate, it's isolated. So that's the cool thing about virtual env. If you want a specific dependencies with specific versions, or just want to keep it isolated, period, you don't want to install it globally, virtual envs are perfect for that. And it's lightweight. It just creates a folder, a little small folder. Just create folders of what it needs, of the interpreter, of different scripts that is needed, and we're good to go. Now if we want to share all the dependencies that we use throughout this isolated environment, we can do that. But first let me show you how you can actually output. those dependencies. So let's do a pip, or yeah, pip3, and let's do freeze. Boom. So this will show all the dependencies that we use, or that we installed, or were already installed inside this isolated environment. We know for sure that we installed request 2.27.1 inside of this isolated environment, and these are some of the dependencies that were already inside of this isolated environment that was needed for it to work. But now, what if we want to share these dependencies with other people? We can do that as well. We can just do a pip3 freeze, put a greater than sign, and let's just specify the file name that we want to use. So let's do requirements.txt. That's usually the convention that I usually see when it comes to like what we name the file for dependencies. Let's do that, and boom. This should pretty much create a requirements.txt file in the same directory as the virtual env, as long as you specify that. We didn't specify like a long directory, we just specified that we want to create this text file, so it creates it in the same directory. And boom, you'll see everything, pretty much what you see in the freeze, what you see in the list used during the freeze is what you will see in the requirements.txt. So if you want to share this with other people, you can, and at least you know you have a list of requirements that is needed to run that project that you are running. And say for instance you were the one that received this requirements.txt, and let's do a change. Let's do 2.28.1, and let's save that, and let's do a install of this requirements.txt. So say for instance you have your own isolated environment, it doesn't have any dependencies yet, you receive this requirements.txt, and now you want to install all the dependencies without having to do it one by one. Then you can just do a pip3 install, and then to install everything within this requirements.txt, use this -r flag, and then do requirements, or whatever the name of the txt that's holding dependencies. I'm just going to use tab to finish off the sentence, or to finish off the command. Press enter, and you're going to see, boom, some of these were already inside of this isolated environment, so it's going to say requirements already satisfied. But for the last one, we changed the version of request, so it's going to change, or it's going to update that to the newest, latest version. So if we clear this out and do a show, or pip3 show request, you'll see that request is now doing, or is now holding 2.28.1. So virtual env is so useful. And actually you'll see that the reason why we have those other dependencies is because to even use requests you would need, or it requires, these other dependencies. So it actually does start off clear, but to actually use requests you will need these other dependencies to actually use it. So that cleared out my thought process for that. So virtual env is very versatile, and if you have a lot of project that uses different versions or different dependencies, this is perfect for that. So thank you guys for watching.